So again, good morning. Welcome back to the John Study Series. We're going to be in chapter 13. If you're following along, we already actually hit the first part of 13. We got through reading what happened up to Jesus washing the disciples' feet, and what an incredible time that was. We're really in the heart of the gospel now. As I've pointed out many times now that, we all the way up to chapter 12, and we still have there's 21 chapters, so we still have a long ways to go. And yet we're already at the last week of Jesus' life, and which tells you a lot about John and the focus of John and what he was trying to make sure we understood about Jesus and what we need to know about Jesus. I mean, there's so many things when you read in the Bible that you're looking for. Repetition. Why is there repetition? We always repeat things when we really want somebody to understand something, right? There's the old saying, people retain 10% of what you say. So if you really want them to retain it, say it 10 times, right? There's many things like that in the Bible, as we'll see. So we're gonna pick up right here at the end of the section we already studied. In verse 17 of chapter 13, he says, "Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." So, he's just washed their feet. He's just set just an absolutely powerful example of leadership, servant leadership. I was getting my master's or my doctorate in leadership at Abilene University, and of course, I had to read a lot of books on leadership, the theory of leadership. And one of the inspiring things is how one of the hottest crazes or the hottest style of leadership out there and I'm not talking the religious world, I'm talking just the secular world in general, has been servant leadership. The theory of servant leadership, the power of servant leadership. And that has made an impact, a splash on the secular world. That the top level leaders in the world are also servants. And if you ever read Good to Great, he talks about the level 5 leader, and that's one of the qualities of a level 5 leader is the humility to serve others. Here 2,000 years ago, Jesus lays a powerful example of that. And he closes that section out saying, "Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." And, that's in so many ways, that is the heart of Jesus' teachings, and especially for this life. We focus a lot on getting people to heaven, right? Or at least on getting people baptized. That's generally where we focus, is trying to get people baptized, trying to get people saved in Jesus. And where we're growing a lot is, the second part of that, in the traditional model of spirituality, you have salvation and then you have sanctification. And salvation is getting them baptized, getting them right with the Lord. And sanctification is helping them grow in Jesus and all the way to their death, till they die, right? Which I see now as the harder part, is the bigger task. I used to be, once upon a time, I think all my focus, and it just seemed like the goal was to get people baptized. But as I grew and I realized, the bigger, honestly tougher thing is to get from baptism to, till they pass away, till their life ends, and helping them develop and grow and stay faithful, helping them deal with the challenges that are thrown at them, deal with the challenges from the world, from Satan, but also even the challenges in the church that you get from the church sometimes. As we all know who've been around a while, sometimes our greatest challenges come from within the church. We are our own, like the old saying, we have seen the enemy and the enemy is us. Sometimes we are our biggest challenge. We get ourselves in the way. And sometimes it's literally me. I'm my biggest challenge sometimes, or you're your biggest challenge. So anyways, all that process and what Jesus is saying here, I think is particularly important to that speaks to the process of sanctification, of growing continually. Not that we'll be saved if we do this. We're already saved. It's that we'll be blessed if we do this. That our Christian life will go better. Our life will go better. I mean, I tell my kids all the time, there's no better life. Yeah, it has challenges. Yeah, it has difficulties. But so does not being a Christian. It's kind of like that bumper sticker. You think education's expensive. Try ignorance. It's the same thing. You think being a Christian is hard. Try not being a Christian. It's even harder in different ways. And I'd rather it be hard and be rewarding and be right than be hard and not be rewarding and be wrong, right? So anyways, now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. This is a fantastic principle to live by and to know and keep in mind all the time. So I am checking this. So if you have any questions that pop up as we go, if I can answer them, I will. All right. So, and you probably noticed that the glasses, because I'm reading your comments, I need my glasses. So on my screen, I could see they make everything big. And I have a giant print Bible. So the campus always teases me that they could read my Bible as well as I could out in the audience. But when I'm reading this, I need some glasses. I need to be able to see what you're writing or saying. So here's our section today, verse 18. So this conversation continues at a dinner table, right? They're at a dinner table. They're talking. And you need to know a little bit about how a dinner table works in the first century, in the first century in the Middle East, as opposed to other places and other times. If you look at the picture I posted on there, a first century dinner table, first of all, you'll notice they're not sitting in chairs, right? They're leaning, they're reclining. And basically, at a special dinner, which this would be a special dinner. This is the Passover meal. You have pillows all around it. So everybody's reclining on these big cushions, and you recline on your left elbow and you eat with your right hand. Okay. And this is how you eat. That's why even to this day in the Muslim law, that if you're caught stealing, you get your right hand chopped off. Well, that's problematic because that's the hand you eat with. That means you can't sit at a table and eat with people because you do other things with your left hand that I won't mention. But your left hand is unclean, your right hand is clean. So if you get caught stealing and you get your right hand cut off, you can't eat with the crowd anymore. You have to eat by yourself, which is pretty major, as you can imagine. So, or you have to eat with people that are okay with you eating with your left hand as well as doing other things with your left hand. So this picture kind of portrays it there. And they're sitting there eating. And it also kind of tells you how they're all sitting, because it says, now Jesus continues, says, I'm not referring to all, okay. He says, I'm not referring to all of you. I know those I have chosen, but this is to fulfill the passage of Scripture. He who shared my bread has turned against me. Okay. He's just said that someone is going to betray him. And of course, they're all looking around, who's the betrayer, who's going to do this. And he says, well, first of all, the Scripture has to be fulfilled, that the one who shares my bread will betray me, has turned against me. And of course, he's referring here to Psalm 41. He says, he who has shared my bread has turned against me. He says, I'm telling you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am who I am. Okay, and there he is again using the I am statement. I am the one who is, the one who was, is, and is going to be. Or another way of saying it, the ising one, the one who eternally is. That's God, right? And again, Jesus makes reference to himself being God. He says, I'm telling you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am who I am. Very truly, I tell you, whoever accepts anyone I send accepts me, and whoever accepts me accepts the one who sent me. And he's beginning to set, set the table, and I don't mean literally, they're at the table, but set up a very long discourse that covers several chapters ahead of us, where he talks a lot about the relationship between us and him, or between him and the apostles, and therefore us and him. And he says, whoever accepts me, and whoever accepts me accepts the one who sent me. He's equating absolutely our relationship with Jesus with our relationship with God. That's very important, again, because it's Jesus that's always being attacked. It's Jesus, who he is, that's always being attacked. Is he really God in the flesh? That's what's constantly being undermined. Even to this day, as I've said 20 times, the three fastest growing religions in our world right now all believe in Jesus, but do not believe in who he is. So, you've got two very large denominational groups, the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, and then you've got the Muslims who also believe, and they call him Isa, but for them he's only a prophet. So for Islam to believe that Jesus would be God in the flesh would be blasphemy. And we know he is God in the flesh. That's our conviction. That's what makes us unique as Christians. And he says, and he's telling them what's going to happen, and he's getting them ready. He said, look, I'm telling you things that are going to happen so that you'll be ready, so that you'll be prepared, so that you can handle this. And after he said this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified, very truly I tell you, one of you is going to betray me. And, one of the things that I love about the Bible is it's so open, it's so transparent. It tells us how people feel. It tells us even Jesus himself shared frequently how he was feeling about things. And whether it was the Garden of Gethsemane, but not just the Garden of Gethsemane. At other times he shares his frustration or his anger and or his turmoil. And it's not a book that glosses over things. If you look at most heroic writings, or you look at the Greek heroes, they're not sharing with you their feelings. They're not at this level. And certainly, when people write things and you compare this to other classic literature where the hero is, always good and always solid and always got it together, and that's not the case in the Bible. Every hero, you also see their faults. You also see their weaknesses. You also see them fall into sin and how they handle sin. And that determines ultimately whether they're a hero of faith or not. That's part of the power of the Bible. It's clearly these guys didn't write it, because if they wrote it, they'd have made themselves look good. And, the Gospels reveal all the apostles' errors and flaws and stupid things they say. And, Jesus rebuked Peter and called him Satan. You don't think Peter would have taken that out? Let's delete that from the final edition, But you get the director's cut. You get God's version of the gospel, not their version of the gospel. Even though, they sat down and recorded it, but it reveals, it's very transparent. So we keep reading. It says, very truly I tell you, one of you is going to betray me. His disciples stared at one another at a loss to know which of them he meant. One of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Now, you gotta love this. You gotta love this, that they're all looking around, and he says, one of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved. Okay, who is that? Well, that's John. Who's writing this? Well, that's John too. John's writing. I love that John calls himself the disciple that Jesus loved. That's a John reference. That's not a Matthew, Mark, or Luke reference. That's a John reference. And it's not just here. It's also in chapter 19, verse 26, chapter 20, verse 2, 21, verse 7, and verse 20. This just, he calls himself the beloved of Jesus, the one that Jesus really loved a lot, Not in an exclusive sense, like I'm the only one Jesus loved, but definitely like saying, hey, I'm his best friend, It's like being at a wedding, and whoever does the toast always says, he and I'm his best friend or whatever. And it's always funny because several guys will get up and say that they're his best friend. And you can't all be his best friend, but everybody feels that way. Certainly John did. And certainly John was very confident. Someone asked, Kathy asked if, do you think that, how did that look that Jesus was troubled? Apparently he didn't show it because nobody is wondering about it. Nobody's asking about it. Nobody's looking at it. Or it could simply mean that they're all so self-centered that they're not even noticing what Jesus is going through. But I would vote he probably doesn't show it. It's probably all happening in his heart. And the Holy Spirit is just giving us an insight to what's going on inside Jesus. But so John calls himself the beloved, right? And Simon Peter motioned to this disciple and said, ask him which one he means, right? Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, Lord, who is it? Now, that tells you something. One of the reasons I picked this picture is because, okay, if they're leaning on their left arm and eating with their right, so that puts John in the right place. He's sitting at the right of Jesus, which is the seat of honor. But he's also, if he just leans back, he's leaning on Jesus' chest, on Jesus' shoulder. And he can say something to Jesus without the rest of the group even hearing it. I often, when I first became a Christian, I used to think, how did this whole dialogue happen and nobody know it was Judas, I mean, didn't they all hear that Jesus said what he said? But I realized that, it's a large table. This picture does have it as one square table. Oftentimes it was in a U. And remember, this is the Passover meal, so this isn't an ordinary dinner. They would have a tablecloth. They would have all the best of plates and cups and everything. And it would be on, if you've ever gone to a Middle Eastern restaurant where you're actually in a Middle Eastern setting, or to someone from the Middle East in their home, they bring out everything on big platters, and that's the way. Or if you've been to a Seder, which is a Passover meal, which is exactly what this was. In fact, we even know where in the meal this is. It's later in the meal because he's dealing with bread, because he's breaking bread, and that doesn't happen till later. So we even know that. But you can picture it. John's up against him, leaning on him, and and I always thought at first, oh, that's weird. He's leaning. Old translations will say he's leaning on his bosom, or he's on his chest. Well, if you're all laying there, because, if you try to picture this sitting at an American dining room table in a chair, that would really be bizarre, somebody leaning way over on Jesus' chest. But if you picture the actual setting, it makes perfect sense. So John and Jesus could have an entire conversation that the other guys can't hear, and Peter's telling them, find out who he's talking about. So Jesus answered him, it is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish. And this is also highly symbolic, right? One of the things Jesus said, I am the bread of life. And he hands the bread to Judas. He's handing over his life to Judas. He's handing himself over. And it's really interesting because it says, then dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. As soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered him. This is a powerful moment. I mean, this is powerful. Jesus gives him the bread. Jesus is the bread of life. The bread represents his body. He gives it to Judas, and Satan takes control. Right there. Boom. It's like he's handed himself over. Some even say this is the turning point right here. This is the moment where all of a sudden kind of Satan just takes over. He jumps in, boom. And another way of translating it is that he took control. He took control of Judas, and which also tells you of, I don't want to go too far with this or make too much out of it, but when we give ourselves over to Satan, he takes control. And we start thinking the things he wants us to think. We see things as things he wants. We see things in ways he wants us to see them. We interpret things in ways. He just takes control. And this is what he does in this moment with Judas. So Jesus told him, what you are about to do quickly. In other words, get on it. Let's go. Let's make this happen. But no one at the meal understood why Jesus said this to him. Since Judas had charge of the money, some thought Jesus was telling him to buy what was needed for the festival or to give something to the poor. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. And you have to understand that even that is in many ways a powerful statement. It has this whole scene. It paints the whole scene. He gives it to Judas. Judas takes off. They don't understand what's going on. There's some commentary here. One of the things interesting about the commentary was that that maybe they thought he was going to go get some food for the festival or give something to the poor. I mean, that's how frequently and common giving to the poor was. That, oh, that's probably what he's doing. Like, I don't think most of us, if Dad got up and went out of the house, we wouldn't think, oh, he's probably going to go drop off some clothes for the poor, or he's probably going to go serve at the food bank. Why? Because it's an extremely rare thing to do, but not for them. For them, it was a normal thing to do, that you go give whatever's left to the poor, or you go give some money to the poor. That's an interesting note. But as soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. That last statement, it's a statement by itself, and it was night. It's another one of those moments where, okay, a picture is being painted here. This isn't a blue sky picture. This is a dark night picture. This is, okay, in a movie, the music would change here. All of a sudden, you get the ominous music playing. There's a tune, and I can't remember what it's called. It's a medieval tune that it's only like 4 or 5 notes. Dun, 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 dun. And it gets replayed over and over in movies. Probably the one that maybe you might remember is at the very beginning of The Shining. As they're driving in the mountains, there's a boom, boom, boom. And I think it's called like the night of hell or something like that. But it's in over 100 different scary movies. Use that tune. This would be where that tune would play. And it was night. Things got dark all of a sudden in a spiritual sense. It says, when he was gone, Jesus said, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself and will glorify him at once. Again, Jesus is explaining the theology. Jesus is explaining that relationship, that special relationship they share together. And then I don't think this is a coincidence, in the very next sentence, he says, my children. He calls them my children. This is not an ordinary term. This is a very affectionate term, teknia, and it just means children, but it's an affectionate term. Mexicans call their kids mijo or mija, and it's only Mexicans. Other Latin cultures don't have that word, although it's spreading into other cultures. But that is it's a definite term of endearment. When you say mijo, it's kind of like saying my son, but my son sounds even more formal. It's less formal than that. Mijo, mija. And you only get to use that word as if you're close or you want to express affectionate love to a little kid. You say, mijo, come here. And that is expressing, I love you, I care about you. It's a very powerful term. You hear it in the Mexican community all the time, but it's what it means. You don't just call anybody mijo or mija. So it's the same thing. Teknia, my children, my beloved kids. He says, I will be with you only a little while longer. You will look for me, And just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. Okay, he's telling them that where he's going, they can't come. In other words, he's not abandoning them, but he's going to do something where they will no longer be traveling around with him. And he's going somewhere where, at least for now, they cannot come and they cannot join him. And all of this is preparing them, right, for what's to come and what they're about to experience. And you will see that when he does get crucified and die, they don't remember any of this. It isn't until later they remember his words. And all these words and all these things he said all of a sudden make sense. And that happens to us all the time. There's things that we read. I think of probably my first year as a Christian, first couple of years, I probably understood about 20% of what I was reading, maybe only 10%. And as each year has gone by and each time I've read, I've understood a little more and a little better. And today I understand much more. But I will tell you this, that as much as I know that I can sit here and go line by line and tell you things, there's still a lot more things that I don't know. And there's things that there's just more. I mean, it's just, like I've said, it's just an absolutely incredible how much there is to learn in the Bible and how much it's packed. So I even love that term, unpacking it, because that's really what it's like. It's like you open up a treasure chest and you're just taking things out. But it's more like a Harry Potter treasure chest. It goes down, 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 down. It's not just a 2-foot deep chest. It looks like a 2-foot chest, but boy, does it have depth. And the more you dig, the more you find. And that's the way it is, right? So he's telling them, he says, you will look for me just as I told you, the Jews. And it's interesting that he calls them the Jews, right? Which kind of tells you a little bit what's happening when John was written. I remember, as I said, John's written in the the latter part of the first century, so mid-90s. And by now, there's absolutely tension between Christians and Jews. And probably the school of Jamnia has already been organized. And this was a school to kind of reorganize Judaism after the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. So that school was very hostile to Christians. And that's where the idea of the prayer that cursed Christians at the end of each synagogue service, that Christians were considered heretics, and the tension between Jews and Christians rose high. And also by AD 95, the church wasn't looked at as a Jewish group anymore. There's so many Gentiles in the church now that Jews have now become probably a minority. And so it's seen as a Gentile movement now, whereas in the early days, it was absolutely a Jewish group with a Jewish movement. So you get language like this, the Jews. You don't get that language in Mark's gospel. You don't get that language early in early writings, but you do get that language later on because that's how it was. It's us and them became Christians and the Jews, where in the early days, us was them. Us and them were the same. So now the big one that we all know very well, and most of us have memorized the scripture at least once in our lives. He says in verse 34, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Okay, so a couple things about this command is, first of all, that this command, it begins with a new command. And, what is new about this? Okay, so one of the things is it's kainos. Kainos, there's two words in Greek for new, or classic words, kainos and neo. Neo is like brand new. Like you go to the store or you go down to a dealer and you buy a brand new car. That's a neo car, right? That's a brand new car. Kainos is you take an old car and you restore it. That's a kainos car. It's old, but it's been refurbished. it's brand new again. You've made it new again. You've upgraded it. You've improved it. You've made it superior to what it was. So that's the word used here. So it's a superior command. This is the upgraded. This is holiness 2.0 here. This is brand new, but in the sense of refurbished, overhauled. A new command I give you: love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And I always love to point out that I think the refurbished part, or the new paint job on this, is how Jesus did it. As I have loved you. Okay, and I always ask people when we study the Bible, what does he mean by "as I have loved you"? What did they think of? People always say, well, the cross. Well, but the cross hasn't happened yet. This is this is the night before the cross, but it still hasn't happened yet. So what did they see in Jesus' life or experience with him that would be considered "as I have loved you"? I think that's a good thing to think about. I think it's a good thing to meditate on, is how has Jesus loved me? How has Jesus loved you? And that's how I'm supposed to love my brothers and sisters. That's how I'm supposed to love the church. And he says, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. That this is how everybody's going to know that we're his disciples, right? And we make that point all the time when we teach people about discipleship, when we teach them about following Jesus, how incredibly important this is. But I think that we have to beware that we don't think because we know better, we are better. A lot of times it's human nature to think, well, because I know what's right, therefore I am doing what's right. Not necessarily. You can know what's right and not be doing it at all. I mean, it's why the Bible tells us to test ourselves, to see if we are living in the light, if we are truly following Jesus. And so it warrants us stopping and asking, okay, am I loving people the way Jesus loved me? And it's a regular question we should ask ourselves constantly and evaluate. And it's something in my mind that we're constantly recalibrating. And I run this filter a lot, where I'll be in a situation with a brother, and you cannot be in an organization very long without at sometimes having conflicts or disagreements, or just realizing that we don't all think alike and we have different opinions. And even I think what is really challenging us and gonna challenge us a lot more is even our politically minded differences. How we view things and how we interpret things, and which news station we watch, and that have differences. And one of the probably the big discoveries for me was that godly people can actually think very differently on some points. They can have politically opposite views, and each have their argument for it. Each have their reason they believe this is right. And just, it doesn't mean that one is ungodly and the other is godly. And it's a test of our love, because if anybody could have criticized us and torn us to pieces, it would have been Jesus. I mean, he's the only one who truly was sinless. And if anybody could judge us and condemn us, it was Jesus. But he refrained from doing that. And he loved us and served us and gave to us. And I think in these times, especially right now in our world, it's so important that we not just love each other, but we love like Jesus, that we love just like Jesus, with that devotion, that commitment. I mean, that'd be my homework to you, is take some time to meditate on this scripture. How does Jesus love me? How has Jesus loved my family? How has he loved the brothers and sisters around me? And how do I put that into practice? And how am I doing on that? And what I see is when I run that filter, when I run that cathartic process, there's always things I know I need to grow in. I know I don't think I handled that the best. I can do better than that. And sometimes it's just calibrate, right? Get myself recentered. And sometimes it makes me even have to go back and apologize to somebody and say, I'm sorry, I don't think I handled that right. I shouldn't have said this, or I should have, whatever, But he said, all men will know you're my disciples, right? By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So that's a pretty significant. I camped out there for a few minutes because it's so significant. And, it's funny because if your Bible has references, it'll reference Leviticus 19:18 to that. Okay, that's the Shema Israel, right? The hear ye Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love him with all your heart, mind, and strength, right? And Jesus added to that. But it's because he was asked, right, in Mark and in Matthew, what is the greatest commandment? And he said, love the Lord your God, and added, love your neighbor as yourself, which was Leviticus 19. So, and which tells you a lot about how Jesus thinks. This is all wrapped together for him. This is all connected. So we'll close out with this. Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? He says, Lord, where are you going? You cannot, Simon Peter asked, Lord, where are you going? Jesus replied, where I am going, you cannot follow, but you will follow later. Peter asked, Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. And then Jesus answered, will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. This is pretty intense. Peter, I think, has the heart that I think most of us have is, look, we're giving everything to Jesus. We're going to lay down our lives for him. We're going to give it all. But Jesus also knows us, and he knows our weaknesses, and he points out to Peter, listen, the rooster's before the rooster even crows once, you will have denied me 3 times. And, the fact that this is actually in I believe it's in every gospel. Every gospel has a recording of this. That's pretty significant. And we all know that later Jesus restores Peter, even when he tells the apostles to let the apostles, when he tells Mary to let the apostles know, he has to say the apostles and Peter. This was a pretty big blow to Peter. But it shows us that even with the best intentions, we're going to mess up sometimes. And we're going to fail sometimes. And the key is getting right back on our feet and continuing to follow Jesus. I mean, the standard is incredibly high. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. We're not called to be like the world. We're called to be like Jesus. It's a tough standard. And sometimes and regularly, we're not going to meet up to it. But that's okay. Get back on your feet and keep following. Don't stop. That's why we are saved by grace and not by our own deeds. That's why we are saved by his mercy and kindness, not by our own righteousness and holiness. So we'll stop there, and thank you. I'm looking. I didn't see any particular questions since the first ones. So God bless you guys, and we'll pick up on chapter 14 when we pick up on Monday. See you then. Thank you for joining us. I hope this has been educational and inspiring for you. If you'd like to know more, please join us by going to study.laicc.net, and we'll be happy to contact you and help you in any way we can.